Our navigation is finished, but now we need to create the structure for the image gallery. We'll do this with a similar technique that also uses an HTML list. Similar to our navigation area, we're now going to use another unordered list to build our gallery inside of our section element. So I'm going to scroll down here and delete this temporary paragraph that's inside of our section. And instead, I'm going to type an unordered list, and inside of that unordered list, I'm going to type a single list item. We'll create other list items, but it's easier to fill out this one first. We'll then copy it and make the necessary modifications because most of these will be the same with just a few small changes. Now, we need to pull in some images for our gallery. I'm actually going to pull in all the images that we'll need for the rest of this project. To download those images, simply download the project files that are associated with this video. You should find a link to them next to the video player. Once you've downloaded them and unzipped the file, you should have a folder that looks similar to this one. Inside, you'll find all the images that we'll need for this project. To add these to your workspace, simply drag the folder onto your workspace and drop it in the area that's darkened that says Drop Files to Upload. Once I drop it in there, the folder and all of its files will be automatically uploaded and imported into our workspace. For the gallery images, you should feel encouraged to use your own pictures. You can of course use these, but if you want to customize the site, you could use your own artwork or your own photographs. This project works best with images that are sized to a width of 1024 pixels and a height of 768 pixels, or more commonly, 1024 by 768. We won't go into detail here about how to resize images, but most image editing programs like Photoshop can do this very easily. With our images in place, let's use them in our layout, like this. I'm going to go to this list item and open it up, and inside, I'm going to type a tag called IMG with an attribute called SRC. Inside of that attribute, I'm going to type the value image/numbers-01.jpg. I'm going to type a second attribute called alt, and then I'm going to leave it blank for right now. Here, we've introduced the image element, or IMG for short. Similar to some other elements we've learned about, it's self-closing, so you don't need to create a closing tag. The image element has two required attributes. The first is the source, or SRC for short. This is very similar to the href, or hyperlink reference, that we learned about for anchor elements. It simply tells the browser where this image file is located. In our case, it's inside of the image folder, and then we want to use the file numbers-01.jpg. This is what's called a relative path. In other words, we're telling the browser where this image is located relative to our index.html file. The image folder and the index.html file are sitting at the same level in our directory structure, or our file tree. Then inside of our image folder, we have our image. This is different than an absolute URL. For example, we could type http:// the domain of our website, which might be example.com, for example, and then the path to our image. However, instead of an absolute URL, we're just going to use a relative URL in this particular case. That will make it easier to upload our site to a web server later on. If that doesn't make sense to you right now, don't worry. We'll be using more examples of relative URLs throughout this project. The second required attribute is the alt attribute, which is short for alternate. This is intended to provide a brief description of the visual for when the image isn't available for some reason. This might be because the site visitor is actually a search engine spider, which can't actually see visual images. It also could be because the site visitor has images disabled in their browser. Yet another reason is to assist site visitors with visual impairments that use special software called a screen reader, which reads text out loud to help them navigate the web. In our case, we've left the alt attribute blank because in just a moment we're going to add a caption to our image just below it. When you add a caption, having the same text repeated in the alt attribute is typically not necessary. Let's save and then refresh our preview quickly to see what this looks like. As you can see, we now have an image on the page, and it's very large, but that's because we haven't applied any visual styling yet. We'll do that later on to help resize the image.